fellas and felleries, I'm going to teach you how to bet on MMA. It's obvious to me at this point that all you have to do is find out where the fight is being held and then just bet on the people from that area of the world. It's crazy. And honestly, I've been doing this for a long time. I'll do a big parlay of just people from that place. And I win most of the time. I mean, it's crazy. I'll usually, because it's the way the parlays work, is you want that one big underdog to hit. So maybe I'll throw a big underdog in. But it's crazy how much money there is to be made just betting on the people that are from that part of the world. So, UFC 294. It was over in the UAE. And as I knew would be the case, I just bet everything on Dagestan fighters. Or people that were close to that. The closer to Dagestan you got, the more money I would put on those fighters. And I was right. 7-0 last night. 7-0 betting on just people from that. I didn't know who any of them were outside of Chimaev. And Islam. I knew who those two were. The rest of them, no idea. Never heard him fight, never seen him again. No idea. There's one that has ginger beard. I'll remember that ginger beard. And a wonky eye. I'll remember that eye. And I'll continue betting on him. And that works if they're fighting in Asia, if they're fighting in Brazil, if they're fighting in Mexico, if they're fighting in Canada. Bet on the country that is closest to where the fight is being held. That's how you win a lot of money. Now, it's not a surefire thing. I was part of a card. I was fighting in the Brazil card when every underdog left. Every Brazilian lost. I was on that card when every underdog won. I actually got fight of the night for that card. It was fantastic news. The other secret I have to fighting is never bet on girl fights. It's something I've always said. I've got my reasons for never betting on a girl fight. I don't care if it's the greatest girl in the world fighting the worst girl in the world. Don't bet on girl fights. And if you follow those two rules, you will become a wealthy, wealthy bettor. Now, there is a little asterisk next to this. The main events tend to be a little more fair. I know why the UFC wants the card to be pretty one-sided. They want the card to win for the country that they're in. They want the Canadian fighters to win, or the Mexican fighters, or the Dagestani fighters, the UAE fighters. They want those guys to win because it helps save in their calendar the next time they're in the area. That's what they're looking for. And so UFC 294, every Dagestani or close to Dagestani fighter won. It's so funny how you know who's going to win, who's supposed to. Sometimes the betting odds are even show it. Sometimes huge showings for it. Sometimes you get that parlay and it's like hardly worth making the parlay. And I understand why the fighters who are not from that part of the world accept to fight. Because in our head, in our fighter head, we know we could beat anyone. We know we could beat the Khabib Nurmagomedovs and the GSPs and the, Cesar Ferreras. We know we could beat them. And so we're going to go down there and we're going to prove we can do it. And then we go down there and we get beat. Because, I guess we were wrong. I don't believe the judging or the refereeing or the doctoring does anything. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think they're just bad at their jobs. The refs are fine. They're getting worse because the actual commissions are getting worse and more. You don't know who's going to be, what the exact rules are, what the scores. So the refs they are what they are. The judges are terrible no matter where you go. I don't think they matter whether they're from there or from somewhere else. They're just bad at their job, all of them. Let's get back to betting. So there was that, which is cool. But if there's a fight card in Mexico, bet on the Mexican fighters. If the fight card in Brazil, bet on the Brazilian fighters. Fight card in Japan or Asia, fight on the Japanese or Asian fighters. The UFC sets that up that way so that the audience gets into it. The main event's a little different. Sometimes you get a fair main event. Sometimes you really do. You get that main event that could go either way. That's usually fairly even. But the rest of the card, just bet on the fighter that's closest to the location of that sport. It is truly impressive how the UFC can do that. How the UFC finds fighters from America willing to go over there to fight the Dagestanis. Even though on paper we're all going to lose. If the Dagestani was to be brought here, it'd be against a different opponent. America's America is most of the roster in the UFC, so it's a little different. We tend to fight a little bit everywhere, a little bit of anyone at any point. And there's so many of us that are on the roster, we get thrown to the wolves a lot of the time. We are very rarely the country that gets brought up, that gets really, pushed to the title shot. But then you get the Conor McGregors who fought Dennis Seaver into a title shot. You get Khabib Nurmagomedov, I pulled out of his fight against Tony Ferguson like 12 times or something to eventually get that title shot. It happens a lot, particularly in the over in Dubai, Fight Island. Now, this one I understand a little bit. This one, because when the world shut down, Dubai or Fight Island, they said, hey, come on over. We'll give you an island and we'll take care of it. And the UFC said, all right, I'll take you up on that. We'll scratch your back someday. A little wink, wink, nod, nod. And these cards, these one-sided cards, it really wasn't a great card. There were some okay fights, but the card itself, I couldn't tell you who any of them are. Outside of the main event, Conor McGregor, and Johnny Walker, I know Enclave. Like those 6 fighters, are the only ones I can tell you. 6 out of, what's that, 24, 25? That's all I can tell you. But the card was built, a little wink, wink, nod, nod, to the UAE audience. That, hey, you guys are going to celebrate tonight. And good God, did it not happen. It happened. It was such a one-sided night. It was embarrassing for the countries that were not from the UAE, that were not from Dagestan, not from that part of the world. It was embarrassing. We got slaughtered. I say we. The rest of the card got slaughtered. Now, it could be that the Dagestanis or that part of the world, their fighters are just such dominant wrestlers and kickboxers that they would make anyone look that bad. I don't think it is. I think the UFC is trying real hard to make sure that part of the world is known to be great, so that part of the world starts paying for more pay-per-views. The UFC has a monopoly, almost a monopoly here in the United States. Here, we Americans watch the UFC. That is what we watch. The Middle East, Asia, they've got a couple more options. They don't always watch us, and they're trying real hard to make sure that they all tune into the UFC. They're trying real hard to make sure that that part of the world advances in martial arts viewership as fast and as fully as America did. And they do that by picking matches. They're not going to give the Dagestani the fight he could lose. Maybe they'd win a tough fight. They're very talented. You see the style of wrestling they have where they don't. So there's wrestling where you shoot, you fail, you back away, you shoot, you fail, you back away. There's wrestling where you shoot, you fail, and you reshoot, you don't back away. That's the Colby Covington style. And then you get the Dagestanis, who shoots one shot, whether it's good or bad, and sticks to it forever. Jesse Taylor always did that. He didn't reshoot. He got one shot, and he just made it work for him. I think the Dagestani's just a little better at it than he is. Which is nuts, because Jesse's about as good an American at it as possible. But anyways, back. So, getting ahead of myself. Or getting behind myself. I'm confusing myself. These fights that happen overseas. If you want to make money, whenever the fight takes place overseas somewhere, just bet on that side of the roster. Bet on the closer they live, they train to the fight, bet on those guys. Not always the case. Main events are not always the case. Main events, sometimes you try and encourage their win by making the main event happen in their homeland. But main events are usually fairly honest. It's hard to fake a main event. It's hard to give the champion a can. They did real well in the UFC this by getting Volkanovski to step up. They did really well with it. Because Volkanovski was supposed to lose, and he did. But he wasn't. It wasn't supposed to look like he was being fed to Islam. It's the fight everyone wanted, just not on 12 days' notice. It's the fight everybody cared about, just not on 12 days' notice. And he went in there, got kicked in the head in the first minute, and the fight was over. With the exception of these last-minute replacements, the main event, sometimes the co-main event, are fair fights. They're fights people don't know who's going to win. But the rest of the card is stacked. Padded to make them win, to make the home team win. And it's crazy that I don't hear more about it. It's crazy that it happens so every time. It happens everywhere. But you don't hear much about it. You'll hear a little bit here in the States, depending on what state. You know, if we're in Tennessee, Vince is going to fight. He might get an easier fight. He might want to get the audience on his side. But never will we get the entire card padded for an American fighter, for an American fight. The other way, so that's what one betting thing I do is just bet on the closer they live, bet on that side of the card. The other thing I bet on, I do it religiously, is never bet on girls. I just don't bet on females. The best female fighter in the world and the worst female in the world, if they're fighting, I'm not betting on. I'm not touching it, not with the 10-foot pole. The best in the world isn't that much better than the worst in the world, and vice versa. They're all talented. They're all good. But there's so few female fighters that it's hard to get that big talent discrepancy. It just is. So bet on the home team. Don't bet on female fights. And you'll make a ton of money. A ton of money. Another sure-fast rule, depending on where you're fighting or that, is if their last name is Nurmagomedov, don't bet on that guy either. Or don't bet against that guy either. Yeah, if their last name is Nurmagomedov, don't bet on that. Don't bet against him. They just don't lose. I don't know how to beat those guys. We've got to become a better wrestler than them, I guess, or out wrestle them. I'm not sure. They seem to fight with no fear. They fight very rarely. Like Americans will fight 3-4 times a year. There's Dagestanis, the Nurmagomedovs. They fight 3-4 times a decade. but they'll always win. It's a 4-year camp each one of them gets. And so that's my betting tips. I hope you like it. I hope you use them. I hope you make $1 million with them. And just enjoy it. Tell me in the comments if you think I'm wrong, if you think you've got a surefire bet pick that goes against what I'm saying. Bet on the home team. Don't bet on girls. And always bet on Nurmagomedov.